Hello and welcome to the Cutie Art Crusaders episode 11th for September 11th, 2012. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you really enjoyed our interview with Veggie55 last week. We all had a lot of fun. It was a great time. Just listening to his voice was probably just worth the entire episode. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Burned01, and today I'm joined by
Flutterguy317. I handle all of the art submissions and run the art on the program.
I'm My Little Pinky Dash, and I've been sick all week, so I'm going to sound like this today.
Yeah, it sound a little rusty. And today I am going to be the ever infamous host, and I am also the special guest coordinator. And last week we said we weren't going to be joined by the ever lovely Rainbow Plasma.
Raisin Plasma.
But
Raisin Plasma.
Yeah, Raisin Plasma. But yesterday something came up, so we weren't able to record on our normal Friday. Thank you for the cough. Normal Friday recording days. So we're recording on Saturday today. And so since schedules got a little changed around, Rainbow Plasma was actually able to join us.
Yay.
Guess who's back, baby? I'm not missing this week. It's great.
So we're not down one.
This week was going to be my first one that I was going to miss. And nope, not this week. I can't.
Yeah, you can't escape from us. Not even at university.
Damn right.
How is university going, by the way?
University is fantastic. I'm currently sitting in my dorm room, so this is the first time that I'm recording from a different location. Oh, that's not true, because last week I was in a hotel room right before I moved in. But yeah, now I'm in my dorm room all settled, and yeah, it's going to be fantastic. It's a bit echoey because I have like a bathroom right next to me, so it's kind of echoey, but
Yeah,
you know,
it's really awesome working with all you guys. I mean, you recorded in a hotel, and now you're recording in university. And then Flutterguy, you were recording in Australia just to join us.
Well, Austria.
Austria, excuse me.
Australia.
Pinky
Wrong-
Dash records
wrong
in
place.
Australia.
Pinky Dash is
Yeah.
all the way from Australia.
Yeah, I am Australia.
So yeah, Burn's doing the
it's
editing
nice to
for
be
these
back.
couple of weeks. But so by the way, thank you very much for that because I don't really have the time. You know, new university student. It's I kind of run out of time. So we're gonna have to figure that out in the future weeks.
Now we're both the editors now, so I suppose.
Yeah, we're kind of flip-flopping back and forth. And thanks for
Yay.
taking over the intro this week. You did a good job considering. And it's not easy, is it? It's not easy just like sitting there.
No, it's not. It was awful. I was like, what, my second
You
try?
sit there in silence, and then you have to come up with stuff on the spot. So there you go.
It's not easy. I've never had to do it before. But I never had to public speak before. I did pretty well at that, so at Everfree Northwest. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started.
Our theme this week, as we mentioned at the end of last week's interview, was minimalism. And there's a lot of different things that people can do with very minimalistic styles. And minimalism can range from like anything like line art to kind of almost shaded like complete pieces. So our first piece today is actually, I think it's a show trace from a scene. Yeah, it's called Smile, Smile, Smile Stylized. And it's kind of interesting because this is taken directly from the show. And they even used a minimalistic style in the show.
By the way, the artist's name is Phantom Badger. So Phantom Badger vectored this off of the show, and we thought this would be a good place to start because we're not just taking a screen cut from the show, so this is kind of like an art piece, but it's also a good way to show that, you know, minimalism exists within the show itself, and it also gives you guys a good example of what minimalism can mean because it might be a little bit hard to think of. So I thought this would be a really cool thing to start off with, but just because it kind of gives an example from the show. But minimalism is kind of a hard thing to define. So if I may, I'll try to define it here. And some people might have different opinions, but personally this is my opinion of minimalism. Minimalism is taking something detailed. Like, for example, something from the show, I believe ponies are quite detailed. Yes, they're all the same color, but they've got hair, eyes, all these different lines in them to make them their own characters. So it takes something detailed and removes details, but still gives you the same idea. So for example, here, if you look at Pinkie Pie right in the middle there, all of her details are removed. There's no outlines, there's no facial expressions, it's just like a block and it's colored. But you still get the same thing. You're still going, that's Pinkie Pie, and you know what it is.
exactly.
So that's minimalism for me.
Going back to your definition, no, it's actually really cool. Minimalism is exactly that. It's the lack of detail in basically the style of art. But just because there's a lack of detail doesn't mean there's a lack of artistic substance. So this is a really great example and a really great use of minimalistic art, or minimalistic style rather, because it has no strokes, it has no detail, there's no filler in the constant color, but each one of the color pieces is overlapping each other. So even though there is no detail and it's just a solid color, this piece actually creates the illusion of depth using color. So if you look at the foreground, you have the dark purple, and then as you go back to each step or each piece of the the vector, it slightly changes in color, gets a little bit more desaturated. There's actually a gradient on the background. So even though this is minimalistic and it has almost no detail other than the large amounts of detail in the outlines of the school and the pony and Pinkie Pie and the town there, it still has a lot of things going for it with depth and movement. And this is actually created really cool for animation. So in the actual show where this is animated, each one of those, that's 4 pieces. You have the foreground, the 2 hills, and then the clouds in the background, on 5 if you count Pinkie Pie. Each one of those pieces is moving individually, and it's actually, what is that called? Is that a panorama? Or how they move from each other?
Parallax scroll.
Yeah, parallax scroll, thank
Yep.
you. And it's all done really amazingly. So this is a great first example because it's minimalistic. Just like Rainbow Plasma was saying, it has an extreme lack of detail, but just because there's a lack of detail doesn't mean that there's a lack of artistic substance, rather.
Well, and this goes back to the sketching episode too, which I think was, what was that, episode 4 or 5? Which is, even in the sketching episode, a lot of the background was very kind of minimalistically done, where it's,
You took my point, damn it.
Yeah, we're going to be fighting over points this episode.
But it's there's a circle, and that's supposed to represent the sun, and your mind fills that in because it sees the details in the foreground, and you kind of fill in the background. And with the minimalistic style, you kind of do the same thing, where the art isn't in the details, the art's in the lack of details, because the viewer can fill in certain things, or can find something that they really like about just the sharp edges or the lack of details.
Yeah, no, this piece ends up being really cool because of that, because it's all of the pieces are a solid color, but it creates that uniqueness in how the colors change, creating depth, and then how strictly the school and the little pony and the flag there are all sharply cut out in contrast with the light background. And you have the purple of the town, and then Pinkie Pie is skipping in this scene too.
Yes.
It's a bit difficult because minimalistic art, like you said, is lacking in detail. Not lacking, but there's an absence of it as a style choice. And unfortunately, with minimalistic art, it kind of all tends to blend together. It's harder to say because, for example, let's just quickly move on to the next one, because a lot of these are very similar. So the next one is something called Wallpaper Twilight Sparkle by Megasweet. And this is hugely popular. This is one of the most famous pony wallpapers, hands down, crazy famous. Just because, everybody's seen all the main 6 versions of these. But for example, there's certain themes in minimalism that are quite common. For example, something you'll notice in this piece is that there's a lack of outlines. So there's no outlines anywhere in this piece. It's just all fills. And like Bernd was saying in a previous episode, that's very unusual for a character. It's more usual for a background piece.
It's interesting because with minimalism, the artist can really choose what they leave in and what they take out. So in this piece, Twilight has her eyebrow in there, and in the previous piece, Pinkie didn't have any details whatsoever. So there's really a range, and this is just one step further away from that pure minimalism, but it's still very minimalistic.
It's actually really cool to see what artists will do with their choice of minimalism or minimalistic art. So with this, you have just the lack of strokes, and then you have the character, the hair, and then a small detail, which would be the eyelash. So it's actually really cool to see in minimalistic art what the artist chooses to leave or what the artist chooses to lack. And you can actually create a lot of really cool different effects with minimalistic art, depending on what the artist chooses to make the focus or what the artist chooses to leave in or out.
Exactly that. What you choose to focus on. So I mean, you can do this sort of thing. So if Twilight didn't actually have her eyelash and the sort of the eye stroke there that denotes an eyelid, you wouldn't be able to tell that she's just looking away with her eyes closed.
Mm-hmm.
She'd just be looking away. And then another one's the one with Pinkie Pie before. You had no recognition of, like, no facial features whatsoever, and yet it still looked pretty cool. It's yeah, I can't speak much.
Yeah, kind of going off that, it's kind of interesting because, like, even with just that one eyebrow addition, Twilight now has some emotional aspect, it seems, and in the pink.
That's the emotion. That's the word.
In the Pinkie Pie one,
That's the word I was looking for.
I mean, you can tell Pinkie's happy because she's always happy, but
She's
yeah.
bouncing.
But if you look at, like, her face, there's no expression, so you can't really tell anything. But our third piece is Rainbow Dash Wallpaper by Big Pony Mac. And this kind of takes minimalism one step further, and it's kind of textured, actually. It's pretty neat. The background and Rainbow Dash's tail / trail of rainbows, I don't know, is very, it's like a grainy texture kind of thing. And this artist takes the minimalism of, like, if you look at Rainbow Dash, she's very minimally put together except for her cutie mark. But then you have her tail, which is all these, like, big flowing strokes and stuff like that. And again, it's without outlines. So there's, like, that constant theme of most minimalistic art with ponies is, without outlines, which is kind of interesting.
Because that just adds another color, whereas minimalism, not so many colors.
Sometimes when people think about minimalistic artwork, they just think like how Rainbow Dash is made, how she's just a basic color and then basic colors for the hair. But there's so much more you can do with minimalism as a style, and this piece is a great example because even the background is still somewhat minimalistic. It just has four clouds, and they're all done similarly, and then it has a gradient on the background, and then it has Rainbow Dash made in, like, the classic, what you would think of to be minimalistic, with her whole entire body being one solid color, and then her hair each being her unique colors for her hair, and then how it kind of diverses from other minimalistic art is how her tail is created, which is, those large flowing brush strokes, each with her like overlapping each other and intertwined, and it creates again a unique feel of how the artist chooses to portray this character, and she does it well using basically color is how she does it.
I like the fact that in the background, and especially in this piece, there's a lot of texture in it. And it's something that people avoid with minimalistic art because they don't want to make it non-minimalistic. They want to make it as simple as possible. But when you have simple textures, like the one you see in the sky, or the little textures that you see in the tail, those still don't take away from it. They don't add unnecessary detail. It just changes the feel a little bit. And I love the way that they've done this in the background, because if you look very closely, it'll probably come across in the video if we show it close enough, but it's kind of hard to see. But, like, especially up in the top right-hand corner, you can see the texture of the background. And it's a little bit too common in minimalistic stuff to just get a flat background. For example, in the wallpaper Twilight Sparkle that we just saw, and in a couple that we'll see in a minute, it's just one colored background. And it's almost like, in my opinion, it takes it a little bit too far in minimalism. I like a nice little middle. So we have a little bit of texture, a little bit of something that pops, and that's exactly what we see with Rainbow Dash's tail, with, like, the paint strokes and the textured background.
Yeah, like you were saying, minimalism is the lack of detail, but it doesn't mean that you have to lack every single amount of detail. So small touches like texture or like the use of brushes in her tail are great in minimalistic art, because like minimalism is what you can do with playing with the lack of extraordinarily, like, fine point details. So Rainbow Dash has no, like, strokes or no details in her body. She's just that basic color. But it's how you portray the character and then the colors. Like, colors in minimalism is really important. And then, like, adding those textures and something a little bit more to the art to make it unique is, again, really important.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people only think of minimalism as, like, what Rainbow Dash is like in here, or like in the Twilight Sparkle wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
But you can really take minimalism to a next level, I feel. By like with this piece with the tail strokes and stuff like that, where they're still very minimalistic, but there is that certain styling to them that gives them that little, bit of appeal. And then with the textures also, yes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point of how most people, when they think minimalistic artwork, they think just absolutely no detail. They just think the basic color. But that's a great point leading into my next piece, our next piece, which is Before the Sonic Rainbow by Kitia, I believe is her name.
Kitita.
Kitita.
Again, sorry about the pronunciation.
Yeah, that's my bad. And in this piece, it has Rainbow Dash and it has her tail in the background, and they're all a very basic color, and again, it has a lack of strokes. But what this artist does really cool is this is still a minimalistic style, but the character still has finer points of detail. But how the artist portrays that detail is, it's very unique and again, very minimalistic. It's not using strokes, and it's more portraying the shadow of the character, but doing it in a very solid color. So for Rainbow Dash, she only has 3 colors that make up her body, and that's where it shows each one of the details in like her wing and then in her hoof, and then it has the darker ones outlining the parts in her hoof. So it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very interesting way that the artist chooses to portray detail in a minimalistic fashion, I believe is the words I'm looking for.
Right. This is probably the one least minimalistic. I mean, there are elements of minimalism within it, but this is probably the one with the least minimalistic, just because it's got the facial expressions. I think are a big part of it. And what I think would be really interesting is if we saw a piece like this without facial stuff. Like, keep the shading in, keep the subtle things and like the hoof definition and all of that stuff, because it's an interesting pose, and without the hoof definition it would get kind of messy. But I'd love to see it like without the eyes and without the mouth, and then maybe without the cutie mark too. Like, I know people want to keep the cutie mark in to keep like show accuracy, but when an art piece, like, it'd be interesting to see those details missing while keeping like shading details in.
And you can always choose unique styles with that. I mean, you can try removing the stroke to the cutie mark to kind of keep the strokeless feel. Or you can try taking a little bit of details away from the eyes, or just however you choose to do it. But I really wanted to highlight this piece because, again, it's like the most detailed minimalistic piece, but it's really unique in how the artist portrays it using, the shading and the entirety of it.
There's something that kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say bugs me, because I think these pieces of art are still good, but I don't know, when I see minimalistic art pieces with show accurate cutie marks, there's something about it that's just like And we saw it in both these past 2 Rainbow Dash ones. They have very, very show accurate ones, and I'm not sure if that requires like the removal of it completely, or whether or not just experiment a little bit with minimalism within the actual cutie mark itself. I think that'd be interesting, but there's something about it that just is not the greatest. It doesn't really get me, because my eye goes to it being like, whoa, that kind of stands out, and it's not really supposed to be standing out. It's not really
the fact that it really stands out is what makes it really cool, because again, when you think minimalism, you think very, very, very subtle is what usually comes to mind. But in this, again, it's in that minimalistic style, and I think the colors are also a really important factor, because there's not a lot of colors in this piece, with the exception of Rainbow Dash's hair and tail. But they're very, very basic colors, and everything is a very constant color, so how those colors blend together, again, creates uniqueness. So in a lot of minimalistic pieces, if pieces of the image are a constant color and try to create details, those will blend together and leave more room for the imagination to work with. And this piece has a lot of use of that in other places, but it's just harder to tell because of it has so much detail.
Yeah, I think going on Rainbow Plasma, on your point with the cutie mark, it's kind of a little bit, I don't want to say jarring, but it's a different style than what the rest of the piece is, and I think sometimes that might be the artistic choice of the artist. Because like with our sketching episode, there's focal points in an image, and so it could be that the artist wants to have the cutie mark be a focal point, or like the area around the cutie mark be a focal point. Just jumping back to the Rainbow Dash wallpaper, I think probably the cutie mark and the tail is probably where the artist wants the focus of the viewer, just because of the there's a little bit more detail there, and it contrasts a bit with the rest of the image.
Yeah, and I get that. I get the focal point and everything like that. I just maybe just in my own artistic experience, I disagree a little bit with where the focal point should be. Maybe less so in the Rainbow Dash wallpaper one, but this one, the Before the Sonic Rainboom, there's just something about it that just like there's enough detail already to take it away from the minimalistic style. Because I think it was very obvious that this artist was going for a more minimalistic style. So if that's your goal, then there are unnecessary details that might be added, like for example in the cutie mark, that would take away. I feel like the focus in this piece is the tail and then like maybe the face. And that makes sense because they put a lot of detail in there. But there's that thing in the middle, like the cutie mark there, just in that piece, there's no reason for the focal point to be the cutie mark. So I think it might just be a different artistic opinion. But personally, I would not. I would have probably even removed it completely. But again, it's up to you.
Yeah, I don't think it takes away from the focus at all. And like you can always again like play with how you portray the cutie mark in different ways. But I think it's or my opinion of minimalism is a little bit different, because minimalism is again like the artist's choice in how they lack detail. And what makes minimalistic pieces really cool is how that artist chooses to portray detail. So in our first example, they chose it with the changing in hue and the changing in colors and creating the illusion of distance. And in this piece, the artist chooses to add uniqueness in how the artist portrays detail in shading and areas that the areas in like the hooves and the wings and the shadows.
It would be cool to see some minimalistic cutie marks, though. That'd be pretty awesome.
I feel like I'm a vector artist here because I always feel like I wish I could just go into like the vector file and just remove some things and see what happens, but it's not quite as easy to do in vector files, if we could go into like stuff and we could like remove the cutie mark and see how it is, because that's just turning a layer on and off. And I mean, they could do that, but they don't have like the resources to do that. They don't provide those. So I wish I could be like talking to the artist and be like, can you just remove that so I see what it's like? But obviously that's not going to happen. Yeah. But anyways, let's move on to something that I find is one of the most interesting minimalistic pieces I've ever seen. And it's actually by a very close friend of ours. It's a piece called Je t'aime by Silver Rain Clouds. And he does something really, really awesome here. And that's, he takes away the entire face and body. Mm-hmm. It's completely gone. And the definition is all in the details. You know, when you think about a pony in the show, what are the specific details that keep them different, other than color? Like, not even thinking about color. Like, just think about, like, what do you guys, like, give me some ideas of what defines a pony besides the color?
Tail.
Yep.
Tail
and mane.
What defines them? Yeah. What defines them as the race, I guess. So horn or wings. Or nothing.
Definitely contrast. So like besides color, color in contrast to color, it would definitely be style of hair, style of mane. I mean, that's about the differentiating feature between ponies is what their hair looks like.
Right, so it's like the hair, so mane and tail, the race, which is horn and wings, and I think the third one that kind of makes sense is cutie mark. And
the other really big defining factor is the eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
That is I feel it's a really important discerning factor, because there's a lot that can be created by playing with the eyes. For instance, Rainbow Dash, Derpy, it all have their what's the word I'm looking for? They're masculine eyes. They have the straight eyelashes, and it creates a boyish feel. Whereas like Pinkie Pie or Twilight or Cadence, or Rarity, all have the wavy eyelashes, the curved eyelashes, creating a very, very feminine feel. And Rarity especially, because she's given an extra eyelash. So she has that even more feminine feel.
Right. So what's interesting in this piece is a lot of times when people do minimalism, they tend to remove those details. They tend to, like we were just talking about, like maybe we should try removing the cutie mark, maybe we should try removing the eyes, they tend to remove stuff like outlines and different things like that. But what Silver does is he takes something like that, and there's even strokes in this, and that's what's so interesting to me. We've talked about the fact that when somebody's making minimalistic MLP art, the first thing that they do is they remove the strokes. That's the first thing they do. Not the case here, because you can see clearly that in some cases he's removed the fills and kept the strokes, but still is looking very minimalistic. So I thought this was a very interesting piece, and we have so much to talk about this piece.
I know there's definitely a lot you can play with minimalism. So, like in this piece, the artist chose to take the strokes away from the hair, just use the color, keep the gradients, and then keep the strokes in the horn and the wing, and then keep the eyes and the cutie mark as a detail, but lack the body. So it's like there's a lot of ways you can play with minimalism is in how you portray a character or portray your piece, or like what you choose to lack or what you choose not to lack. Another really important factor is consistency, like throughout your piece, keeping a consistent style. And in this, the artist actually chooses 3 different ways to portray said character. So you have like the stroke, the wing, the eye, the cutie mark, and the hair. So it's actually kind of interesting because in a lot of pieces, it keeps a very minimalistic pieces. It keeps a very constant theme where it's just this character and then these basic colors. And in our last piece, it was that character, the colors, and then like the shadows and the details, and then like in the hair. Where so how you choose to keep the constant theme of how you're portraying what your piece is, I guess, is something that is really fun to play with in minimalistic art.
I just think that this is really amazing because of the different styles used, but still when you look at it, it's a minimalistic piece of art. Because like you said, people when they're doing minimalistic things, they all do one style of art. And that is definitely a safer way to go about it. If you try to do 3 or 4 different things and it goes wrong, it doesn't really look that great. It doesn't always come out the best, but there's something really interesting here that he's done with these 3 different things. You know, we've got the hair is stylized with fills. The horn and wings are, no fill, all stroke. And then the cutie mark is show accurate. So 3 very different styles, but because those are the only details and those are the details that are standing out, there's nothing else to distract the eye from it. It kind of works together in a way that's it's harder. It's hard to describe exactly what I'm trying to say here, but there are so many different ways to emphasize to get things to pop out. And minimalism is a lot about taking things away, making things more subtle. But by taking things away, you're really trying to pop out stuff more. It's hard to describe, but by taking things away, you're supposed to be making certain things pop out. You're taking away the distracting little details that don't matter, and you stick with the things that do matter, the things that are recognizable. And this piece does a great job of that.
You're cool. I feel like you're taking my job of ranting in this episode.
Of course I am.
Well, I think you guys switched roles.
Yep. Yeah. That's all right.
Pern, you did the intro. Rainbow Plasma's What is going on?
Hey, okay, I'm passionate about this piece of art.
Yes.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is one of my favorites from Silver.
Mm-hmm.
But we should move on because I have a feeling Bernd will rant about this next artist.
Well, hold on. Before we move on, I just wanted to touch on another feature of minimalistic art, which Silver portrays really well, and that's negative space, like that, the accurate use of negative space, especially with Cadence's head and like where her tail meets her quote-unquote body, because there really is no body outline there. But you can tell.
Would you like to describe a little bit about what negative space is for those who don't know?
Sure. Negative space is kind of using it's kind of cutting into the details. So you're not like outlining a shape like on the show. You outline the ponies basically. You know what is the pony and what is not the pony, and it's all within a certain outline. And negative space basically, for instance, in this piece, Cadence's head is a prime example of negative space, because instead of kind of outlining Cadence's head, they just take away from her mane. They basically cut into her mane, and it's the same shape as Cadence's head, and you know it's Cadence's head. But instead of outlining it, it's a different technique.
The negative space is exactly that, but it's a little bit more. Positive space is what you want your focus to be. It's what is the image. So in brony art, normally it's the pony, it's your characters, or it's whatever your focus is, the castle, whatever you're looking at or you want the person to look at. And then so in our sketch episodes, the positive space was the character. It was that highly defined, outlined, highly detailed focus. Where and then the negative space is the background. It's the part where you don't want the person to look, or the person doesn't need to look, or what isn't the focus of your piece. But that's the negative space is still really, really important. So in this, it's minimalistic because how it uses that negative space. And in this, just like you were saying, the head and where the tail would connect to the body is all negative space. And in art, negative space is really important to look at. And in minimalistic art, the negative space in this is that just that solid pink. And in our last example, negative space. So before the Sonic Rainboom, negative space was that peach. It was the cloud. So playing with negative space ends up being really cool because negative space is what isn't the focus. So it's what you kind of have free range to depict that how you will. So in sketches, artists will lack detail. In this, our Silver Rain Clouds uses pink as a solid color. And then in some pieces like background pieces or landscape pieces, negative space will be how the piece flows. But it's really hard to describe. Something that we constantly have fun with is our struggle to constantly describe art, because a lot of us aren't really used to it, especially myself in particular. Like, I love doing it, but I struggle with it a lot, but it's a lot of fun to try to describe different artistic means.
Yeah, it's hard to find the right words to describe it. I guess you can just throw this piece up really quickly, which is called Twilight Splatter Style by Flizzic, and this was actually sent in by email, which is pretty awesome. Send in your art, guys, because it's amazing. And we'll give you a shout out too if we feature it. And this piece right here, I guess this defines negative space better than words can define it, because it's Twilight, and the color is all around the piece, but her head's missing basically. So
Right, that's a great example of negative space.
yeah,
It's not something put in, it's something cut out.
yes.
Hey, Berndl1 here. Turns out that definition of negative space isn't entirely accurate. The correct definition for negative space is actually the space around and between the subject of an image. So it's not exactly what's been cut out per se, but for this example it's very interesting because with Twilight's silhouette cut out, it makes her head, her silhouette, and then the area around it negative space, because the positive space or the subject of this piece is the splatter around her. But I just didn't want to create any confusion about negative space is just what's cut out of an image. Knowing what negative space is very important in art, because being aware of what you want the subject of your piece to be, and then what you want the area around what your subject is very important. I just like to keep our show as educational as possible. So just know that the term negative space only refers to the space around what is the subject of an image.
That's basically all it meant.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next, because we're going to run out of time here. We have some questions that we have to answer at the end. So let's move on to the next one, which will also be kind of our last piece here, but it's just something we wanted to throw in. It's something called Flight of Fancy by Egophiliac. And this is a great example of something I talked about before, which is the use of textures to still convey minimalism, and how textures don't exactly take away from minimalism.
They look like paper ponies.
Right, exactly. So it almost looks like a piece of paper. But as you know, paper doesn't exactly always have super defining features to it. It's not like you're writing on a piece of wood with knots and lines and noticeable things. It's got a texture to it, but it's very subtle. So if you take a very close look at the background here, it's almost got like these faint vertical lines going down, giving a little bit more of a texture to it. And the hair for Celestia and Twilight, it looked kind of like felt, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. But again, this is paper art, like it's cutout art. So the reason why it can be considered minimalistic is because every single piece is a solid color. It's very defining. It doesn't have like a changing gradient or something in it. It's very solid, and it's very and sometimes can be very plain, and just how it doesn't have a lot of detail. So in this piece, again, it's really cool to see how the artist uses those solid colors and overlaps the different shapes. And the piece also has depth in it. So something really unique to paper art is a lot of the pieces have what is it? They have the shadow underneath, the little drop shadow. So like on Celestia's legs, and then on her hair and things like that. So you can tell in this piece that it's paper art because it has depth in how the shapes overlap each other. And it's really cool to see how Egophiliac plays with that, and plays with the color, and plays with the shapes.
Another cool thing that I thought was really interesting in here that's not really touched on very much in minimalistic art is the use of shadows to kind of convey depth to the piece, because minimalistic art has a tendency to look a little bit flat, and sometimes that works. Say you're doing a minimalistic wallpaper like the one we had with Mega Suite, but again, it can kind of look samey. Mm-hmm. And even using negative space, it looks very flat. And so a combination of having the texture and also these kind of shadows to make them just a tiny bit pop out is a great way to change your minimalistic art from the same old thing into your own kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
And then like that popping and using of shadows is again really cool in paper art like this. And like I loved how they used it in things like Paper Mario and things like that.
Yes, Paper Mario. Let's bring it up on the podcast more often. I love that game.
Yeah. But paper art style.
I have seen quite a few other things done in that sort of style with a bit of a drop shadow behind it. I'm not going to bring them up, but there is quite a bit of it around, and it all looks quite well if it's done properly.
Yeah,
it's good though. It's really good because I feel like the first step in doing minimalistic art in ponies is remove the outline. I can say as much as I want. Oh, everybody else does that, but it's necessary. It really is. Like I can't say anything about it. I'm not gonna say somebody's bad at doing minimalistic art because they removed the outline, because it's just necessary, guys.
I've seen.
You just have
on the
to do
contrary,
it.
I've seen a lot of really cool minimalistic pieces that play with the outline, where the outline is just a solid color. So when the character overlaps, or how the character's features, arms, wings, or whatever overlap, those outlines will blend into each other and then create some negative space and some lack of detail that can be really cool.
Well, I guess so, but they're not on the podcast. But anyways, you lose the thing that outlines do very effectively in the show is they convey depth. Outlines are used the most to convey depth, pop things out of the background, make things stand out. So when you lose the outlines, you lose out of that depth. So you need to find a different way to create depth. And drop shadows and texturing are two perfect ways.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Egophiliac, and like how she portrays depth in this is again really skillful.
Yes.
So. I mean, my own OC face in this is a bat pony straight out of her headcanon. So
yeah,
yes,
you're a big fan of Egophiliac. Have we featured something about Egophiliac?
I think we probably have.
I think we might have.
I think the only thing about Egophiliac that we featured is my homage to her, the comic that I vectored of hers.
Right, maybe, yeah.
But in the future, we will feature lots of Egophiliac art.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes.
You talk about her so much.
She does some very cool Art Nouveau stuff, and that might be a theme in the future. So.
Going back to the drop shadows, what I find really interesting is that Egophiliac doesn't really just have a single set shading of drop shadow. Like if you look at Celestia's mane, for instance, like the green part of her mane, the upper part has a drop shadow, and then where it kind of comes around, the drop shadow disappears, so that you do get that contrasting depth, which is really neat.
So, and yeah, her hair is again a really cool piece because how it's stacked on top of each other. So the blue in the middle is the top, and then the pink and the green are the next one down, and then that teal on the top there is the bottom, and then her little hair soup on the top is overlapping that other green. So normally in minimalistic art, colors will blend into each other, and you won't get that differ where like they differ where they're separate. But in here she uses the drop shadow to separate those two colors, which is really cool. Very subtle things go a very long way in minimalistic art.
Twilight's cute as well.
Yeah, she is. She's quite cute.
She's so happy. So happy.
Right.
I can't even say that word. Happy. Here we go.
PD's quite sick. Can you do the questions this week, PD?
I'll try.
It'll be fun to hear you try. So.
Bear with me while I try and talk. Okay, so we do questions now? Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Alright, so we've got a couple of questions this week. And I believe they were both sent in via email, which is pretty cool. We'll
Yeah,
mention,
they were.
mention them a bit later. Okay, so first one I've got this week is, I am an engineering, science, and math person with absolutely no artistic abilities, but I adore the My Little Pony fan art, so I was merely wondering if you have any tips as to what to start with, how to practice, how to learn, and probably most importantly, is it even possible someone with no starting talent to get into this? Sent in by B Saint to our email address.
See, this is a cool
Yes.
question for me because
Yeah.
one of the things I love about art is I just love talking about art. I love talking about what goes into art. And my absolute favorite is talking about what makes something cool or what makes it so awesome or so artistic. So that's why I love being a part of the show, is because I get to talk about what I love and how things look. So in my personal opinion, a great place to start is just looking at something and going, why does this look so awesome? And then trying to replicate that, even poorly, is a great way to start, because you understand concepts of how things work. So like in my art classes and like in my self-portrait, I would look at like what I thought was cool features and playing with details of lines and just whatever you want. But there's less complex ways to start. I'm sure my other members would be more willing to recommend.
I think it's really interesting for all of us because we're all
Yeah.
people who started out with, well, no artistic ability that we knew of.
Yeah.
I just saw pretty pictures.
Yeah, and we wanted to contribute. I think something that's really cool, and I mean, I can recommend doing any kind of art style that you want. If you feel like you have an art style you want to try, go ahead and do it. You know, we always give the same advice, which is just go and do and do and do and just keep going, and you will get better at it. I know it's tough, but you will get better. But something that I will recommend, if you're finding that you're going out, you're doing, and you're doing, and you're doing, and you still don't feel like you're getting enough satisfaction, if you're not happy with what you're doing, then why not try vectoring, actually?
Yes.
I think
Plugging the
it'd be really
vectors.
interesting because from your, like, I think what's really interesting about your situation with engineering, science, and math, you know, I'm very much a math science person. You know, I'm going to university for computer science, so
Computer science
I
isn't
think
real
vectoring,
science.
it is real science.
Yes.
It's not real science.
It's really interesting because I feel like
It's made of molecules. Yeah.
Go on.
I feel like someone who's interested in those kind of topics would probably be kind of interested in vectoring because it's a little bit more mathematical and it's a little bit more, I don't know, fine-tuny and mechanical compared to
It's-
art, which is more flowy and paintbrushy. It's more mechanical. So try out some vectoring. We've got some great tutorials, and I'm sure Bernd will link them in the description or in the video. But try out vectoring if you're the kind of person who enjoys engineering, science, and math. I wouldn't be surprised if you liked vectoring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very
You
mathematical.
can call it that
sort of
kind of
based.
mathematical style, but I mean, it's, in my opinion, again, it's like it's just being comfortable with working with like whatever programs interface that you work with. So like I was always really comfortable with the pen tool, so vectoring came as second nature to me, and then learning just how what the show style is was the major part of what vectoring is to me. So it kind of it's a little bit different than your opinion, because in how like I came to being really awesome at vectoring is I would look at the show and I would look at what are the rules of the show, and like what does the show do to make it look so amazing or make it look so aesthetically pleasing, and then that's what I took into like learning how to vector and going into making good looking vectors. And then I was always really comfortable with the pen tool in Photoshop and Illustrator, and then I forced myself to learn Inkscape and I ended up really enjoying it. But I mean,
I like it.
vectoring, it's when learning vectoring, it's really important to be comfortable with the program or medium that you're working with, and the medium would be digital, and then your user interface for whatever program you're using. But I mean that would be a great way to start, is learning someplace like that. But I mean, if you're more comfortable with working with something more traditional, whether it be pencil or paint or whatever, I mean, don't be scared to do something outside your comfort zone just for fun. Stencil art with spray paint is a really great artistic outlet. A man by the name Velour Fog on Reddit makes some really awesome stencil art. You go buy some paint, buy some pens. I mean, have fun with it, really. Art's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and if
One thing I had to say on this subject as well, if your eventual goal is to not be primarily a vector artist, which is what us three mainly are, if your primary goal is to, you know, be, I don't know, either traditional or digital, but doing it as an actual drawing, as a sketch, and you're having issues with it, learning vectoring helps a lot. I mean, when I first started trying to draw ponies a few months ago, it was horrible. And then I'm like, well, whatever, I just gave up. And then I moved on to vectoring. And then recently I went back and tried to do ponies again by sketching, and it was so much easier because having done all this time vectoring, I could get a better handle on sort of the proportions and what ponies look like. And I could see myself being wrong, and then fix it up, which I found was a great help.
You stole my thing. I was gonna say that.
Well, it's about time I did, because everyone steals mine.
A point I'd like to make is one of the reasons why I feel My Little Pony fan art is so amazing is that whoever makes it is always extraordinarily passionate about what they do or what they make. So, I mean, there's so many people out there that make such amazing art, and they're so passionate about it and like what goes into making it and how it looks. I mean, that's again something really important. So if you're passionate about learning and wanting to make something that's just comes out to be beautiful, and in the end, like
you're beautiful.
I'm trying to make a point here. But yeah, like being passionate about what you do is again really important. I think that's why our community is so special. So
Bernd has long hair. It's pretty.
Thank you, Dash.
Okay.
Majestic is the adjective that I enjoy.
Anyways.
Majestic.
Next question.
Okay, next question. What groups on DeviantArt do you all watch that you'd recommend to anybody interested in finding good pony art? Sent in by, I don't know, Datamne, maybe? Also sent in via an email address.
Like, does nobody have anything to say about this? Because I have something to say. There's
the obvious one, which is MLP Vector Club.
Self-promotion.
If we're doing plugs, I can plug a few.
No.
We're not going to do plugs here. The thing is, it's tough to plug stuff because on DeviantArt, there's so many different groups, and they're just popping up every single day. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't really go to one place to find all the good art.
That's right.
You could go to cutieartcrusaders.deviantart.com and follow our show, and we're trying to highlight art. It's a good one. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to highlight art here. So, you could always follow us and check our favorites group and stuff like that. But in general, it depends on what you're looking for. Yeah. So what I would recommend doing is find a couple of pieces that you really like. And along the right-hand side of those pictures, you're going to see a little thing saying featured in these groups. And it'll have a list of groups. Maybe go through those groups and see, do you like those groups? And then watch them. It's really as simple as that.
And I think there's a lot of like really large groups, but sometimes the more specific groups are the things to watch, because if you're like really into like line art, I know there's groups just dedicated to line art, or like the Vector Club is dedicated to vectors. So sometimes those are better.
That's exactly. I was going to say the exact same thing. If there is one particular facet of the brony fandom that you like, there will be a group for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who moderate those groups put a lot of hard work into finding like great pieces of that specific style.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we are the Vector Club, but there are vectors purely for the Cutie Art Crusaders. There are groups dedicated to that. There are groups dedicated to art about particular ponies. There's all sorts of different things.
Mm-hmm.
There's groups for particular pairings. There's just everything.
Yeah, I was about to say I personally like Soren Dash, so I'm part of a group of Soren Dash. Like, that's just
I'm also a member of a few with Pinky Dash.
And there's some groups that are a little bit more strict about the kind of art that they allow to go into their gallery, and those are often great because they specifically hunt down what they consider to be really good art.
Yeah.
So there is one group that I've found that has actually a lot of the art that we've featured on our show in it already. It's best of MLP FIM, dashes between each word, so best dash of dash, etc. There, in that group, there is a lot of amazing art. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and it's on the front page as one that we featured in our Fire episode. There's a couple in there from Harwick's art and Aaron JVL, which we've featured before. There's a lot of it in there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for some stuff that maybe we'll see in the future on our show, or maybe not, go check them out because there's so much in there.
Yeah.
And again, so like the question is specific to what or what groups on DeviantArt do we watch. Like we watch quite a few. We watch some of the larger ones. We watch some of the smaller ones. But I personally usually skip over those groups because there's a lot of great artists that I'm already watching. And how I got sucked into the Brony fandom was Reddit, and a lot of stuff makes it up there, and a lot of great artists do. And they link me back to those artists, and then I usually watch those artists. And when I look through my DeviantArt for what I'm watching those specific people and like the new stuff that they usually come out with, and then that's usually how I look through the different kind of art submissions, as I look at how like different artists are progressing, like Cosmic Unicorn, the pieces she makes, and other artists.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes big groups can kind of, I don't want to use the word spam because, you know, all of the art pieces might be good, but there's only so many pieces of art you can digest at once. So when you see like 50 new things from this group, they might be all 50 amazing things, but you look at that number and you go, ugh. So having them separated by artist, you know, I think we all tend to follow the artist more than the groups. But if groups are what you really want, then there's plenty of resources out there. All you need to do is just go out and find them, and a good way to do that is either through the artist or through the piece itself. And that's, I mean, there's no other way to.
Sometimes I'll just go through very large art or DeviantArt groups to find, you know, very specific artists and just follow those artists to see if they come out and make anything amazing.
All right. Well, I think that's all for now. There's another question here, but it's quite silly, so I'm gonna skip it.
No, we should answer. We should ask it anyway. Because the answer is me.
Who wrote that?
All right, we have one more.
That was me.
I'm sorry. No, we're actually going through with this question, huh?
We have one more silly question.
Yep.
Yes.
Because I got a funny answer. So.
Yeah, why not? Okay, so question here. Who wears the fancy pants in your guys' relationship? Sent in by Fudder Guy.
See, I feel
17.
this is a very interesting question because most of the time, Rainbow Plasma plays our leader and host and kind of our wrangler, and the very what is the word I'm looking for? He's kind of the guy who wears the bossy pants in our little podcast relationship. But I feel I'm the guy who wears the artsy pants, or maybe the rambly pants in our kind of relationship.
The artsy
It's where I love rambling about art, and I have my fancy little artistic pants on, where I like to talk about, you know, more advanced subjects in art and be really educational. So maybe like the teachery kind of pants.
I think you're the fancy pants, and Rainbow Plasma's the bossy pants.
Oh no, I'm definitely the bossy
leader
pants.
But see,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel each one of us has our different kinds of pants. I don't know if any of us wears fancy pants specifically. I might vote for myself to wear fancy pants if you consider being artsy fartsy fancy.
Artsy,
But, I
fartsy,
feel-
fancy, pantsy.
That's pretty awesome.
I feel Pinky Dash wears the clowny pants in our relationship.
He's not
if you
wearing
will,
pants.
because he's
Thanks, I wasn't sure
he's
what
the
colour
constant comic relief and always manages to make us laugh. So.
And that accent is so
Okay,
glorious.
let's move on from the pants
Ah,
here.
yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
I'm ending this episode now because this is getting way too silly pants right now. Okay.
See, bossy pants. Oh, demandy pants.
I am the bossy pants. I'm looking at the time, and we're already going on for probably over 55 minutes.
Flutter Guy doesn't have a
We
pants
should
yet.
be wrapping up by now, and stop talking about pants. Okay.
Flutter Guy
thank
needs
you,
pants.
guys.
Flutter Guy has pants
No,
too.
that's okay. Flutter Guy's the adorable pants.
He's actually, I think he's more the nice pants.
Oh,
He's actually more the kind pants.
He's
I
like
wasn't
the
even supposed
Fluttershy
to be
pants.
here for this episode, and okay. Are we done?
Sorry. Let's
I'm the
plug.
host here. I'm the one who ends this podcast. All right.
time.
Well, Rainbow
Any
Plasma
questions?
is right, and that's why he is the host most of the time. It is about time to wrap up our rambling and silly pants.
Let's just kick him out.
So, again, again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for watching our show. We love your feedback, and we love your support, and we love doing this for you, and we're all really passionate about it. And before we end our podcast, we have one more thing to do, and that's plug all of the ways that you can follow us.
Okay, so we've got a DeviantArt page, which is cutieartcrusaders.deviantart.com. That's where you can go to follow along with all of our art. For example, anything that we featured here and any of the honorable mentions that may not have made it onto the show, but we still think is a good example of the theme. All of that will go into our favorites folder on that page. So go and follow that and go check that out. There'll always be a link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube, so make sure to go there. But that's the place you can go in case you want to follow along. We've also got a Twitter and Facebook. So, you know, if you want to go to @Cutie Art Crusade, that's where we're doing all of our Twitter shenanigans. If you want to get announcements for when the live stream's happening.
I don't know what Twitter is.
Twitter is fantastic. Moving on.
Ooh. One more note about Twitter. If you're following John Azeko, his account got hacked shortly ago, and it sent out a mass message to each one of his followers saying, "LOL, you're famous," with a YouTube link. Don't click that link. It's actually a spam. He managed got hacked, but he fixed it. He reset his password and got it all fixed up. But just a warning, if you haven't checked your Twitter in a while, don't click that personal message.
Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Back
Public
to the
service notice.
podcast. We also have a Facebook, which is just search up Cutie Art Crusaders on Facebook.
Yep.
So you can go there and follow us there. And also, we have an email account. This is probably the most important one, which is cutieartcrusaders@gmail.com. It'll be on the screen right now for you guys to check out. That's where you're going to want to send in all of the art, all of the... I just hit my knuckle on the desk. That's where you're going to want to send in all of the art, all of the questions, anything that you want to talk to us about. That's where you want to go and send that in. For example, the people who were on the show today for the question section, those guys sent in some questions. And to be honest with you, we don't get a tremendous amount. So, you know, send in some good questions and chances are you'll be on the show.
Before we end the podcast, actually, one more kind of shout out is to the percussion brony, who has been producing background music for us, which is absolutely amazing. If you're listening to us and you hear some kind of jazzy
It'll be going
style
on in the
stuff.
background right now, and that's
Yeah.
him.
He's got a
Yeah,
bunch of
it's
things now. He's added
amazing.
we had one piece a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually sent us in like 3 or 4 more, so we're going to use that more and more, which is awesome.
Yeah, so cool.
So if you hear our background music in the show when we're doing questions or other things, that is percussion from him. So tip of the hat to him.
He's also got a YouTube page, which will be linked
Yes.
below.
It'll be on the screen as well.
YouTube.com/thepercussionbrony. At time of recording,
There you
he's
go.
got our like normal jazzy music up. And then there should be some other stuff up there as well, which is really, really awesome. So thanks again for doing that. He did that without us even
That's
asking
awesome.
him or anything. And it's really awesome.
In fact, he came to ask and asked if it would be alright. I mean, just go for it and send it to us.
Yeah, it's really a good
Yeah.
guy. So if you would like to make any kind of submission or send it to us for our show, like feel free.
Yeah, and we are planning on eventually doing a fan submission episode. So if you guys want to submit art like for the Cutie Art Crusaders, that would be awesome.
Yeah, any of our OCs. Oh my goodness, if someone did my OC,
I would squeak.
I don't even know what to do.
I would love anything. But
Alright. But anyway, so that'll be the end of our show. So again, thanks to everyone. So thanks again for joining us. And my name is Burned01.
I'm Flutterguy317.
And I'm Pinky Dash and really quiet.
This outro sequence is all out of order and it's messing with my head.
Just say goodbye and we can end it.
I'm Rainbow Plasma. Bye. See you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.